Hello everyone, welcome back to Very Bad Deck Techs. My name is Kevin, and our deck for today is all about teaching our opponents life lessons, and if they don't learn, there will be consequences. This deck will be helmed by my favorite Avatar The Last Airbender character, Uncle Iroh. Specifically, we are going to be looking at Iroh Grand Lotus and how giving spells a flashback cost of effectively 0 can lead to some very long turns, some very big boards, and a lot of damage. Iroh Grand Lotus is a Teamer legend from Avatar The Last Airbender Universes Beyond. Iroh is 3, a green, a blue, and a red for a total of 6 mana, for a 5/5 with 3 sections of text. The first section of text is simply that he has Firebending 2, meaning that when he attacks, you create 2 red mana that you keep until the end of combat. The second section of text reads, during your turn, each non-lesson instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to that card's mana cost. Flashback allows you to cast a spell from your graveyard with the relatively small downside that you have to exile that card upon resolution. This second ability can be seen on Lier, Disciple of the Drowned, and has proven to be incredibly strong. But Iroh's third section of text is what makes this deck really hum, which gives all lessons a flashback cost of 1 generic mana. Even before the Avatar set, this would have been insane with all of the Strixhaven lessons. The Avatar set has introduced honestly more power-crept versions of those lessons, so this deck is no longer just a gimmick, even if mine is not fully optimized. With spell discounters, cast triggers, and storm cards, this deck is a lot less tea time Iroh and a lot more pull-ups in prison Iroh. Though Iroh's ability to give any instant or sorcery flashback is strong, this deck is hoping to lean into lessons, predominantly to increase our storm count and cast triggers. As such, we are boasting a hefty 41 instants and sorceries, with 27 being actual lessons and 5 being honorary lessons, which I am defining as cards that untap lands or produce enough mana to pay for their own cast, mimicking the discounted cost of flashing back lessons. These spells are supplemented by ways to cast our spells more easily or payoffs for our casts that will help us solidify our win. Since this is a storm deck that wants to fill our graveyard with spells, this deck is going to follow different stages of the game that we will go through, starting with ramp. No matter what we do, we will want mana, so there is a robust pseudo-ramp and actual ramp spell suite. By pseudo-ramp, I mean cards that put lands into our hands rather than onto the battlefield. Aang's Journey, Environmental Sciences, and Seismic Sense can all put lands into our hands with differing levels of additional effect. Energy Bending does not get you a land, but it does act as Chromatic Lantern for a turn and draws us a card. Our actual ramp package consists of 2 word-for-word reprints and 1 minor rework. Shared Roots is just Rampant Growth as a lesson, and Cycle of Renewal is just Harrow as a lesson, both of which are very solid ramp spells. Elemental Teachings is a more expensive but direct ramp version of Realms Uncharted, charging 2 extra mana to put cards into play rather than into our hand. In addition to these lessons, we are also running 7 creatures to help us cast our spells. 3 of these creatures tap for mana with varying degrees of additional abilities, including enabling our ally creatures to tap for mana, and being able to add 2 mana to cast a lesson. These 3 are buffed by one of the best mana dorks ever printed, Badger Molecup, which is a 2/2 that has any creature you tap for mana produce an additional green mana, including the now land creature that it is just Earthbend, all on a 2-drop. In addition to these 4 creatures are spell discounters such as Gran, Teamer Battlecrier, and Uncle Iroh. Spell discounting is always helpful, but given our commander's flashback cost for lessons, any of these creatures means that you can cast your lessons from your graveyard for free. With our mana at our disposal, we want to make sure that when we start storming off, we can convert it into a win. This build wants to win via combat damage, and we have several ways to do that. The first combat strategy is to go wide with tokens. Young Pyromancer and Third Path Iconoclast are some of the best storm payoffs ever printed, and make a 1/1 each spell cast that will get out of hand very quickly. We are also running the Mechanist Aerial Artisan, who makes a clue for every non-creature spell cast and can tap to animate one of them into a 3/1 flyer. We also have Toph, Hard-Headed Teacher, who earthbends 1 every time you cast a spell, and earthbends an additional 1 if that spell was a lesson, which gives us extra creatures. Both Drakehatcher and Balmor Battlemage Captain are fantastic at facilitating a go-wide strategy while also helping support our secondary strategy, going tall. Drakehatcher has Vigilance and Prowess, and when it deals combat damage, it gets that many incubation counters. These incubation counters can be turned into 2/2 flying drakes at a rate of 3 counters per drake. Balmor himself is a 1/3 flyer that gives every creature you control +1/+0 and trample each time you cast an instant or sorcery. We also have 3 additional prowess creatures, Firebending Student, which firebends equal to its power, Tylee Chi Blocker, who taps down a creature, and Master Paku, who can make opponents mill equal to the number of lessons in your graveyard. If combat damage won't cut it, we also run Sorcerer's Class, which when fully leveled up can get very out of hand on a storm turn. As we are setting up for our win turn, we want to make sure that we can protect ourselves and our cards. The first way to protect ourselves is to stop others from hurting us, which comes in the form of a very diverse lesson-based removal spell suite. Boomerang Basics is a cheap, non-land bounce lesson that lets you draw a card if you target something you control. There is Artifact Hate in the forms of Price of Freedom and Origin of Metal Bending. Damage-based removal comes in 3 forms: Iroh's Demonstration, Firebending Lesson, and Combustion Technique. For larger toughness creatures or creatures with Indestructible, we luckily have Introduction to Annihilation and Zuko's Exile, both of which will exile a permanent and give its controller a card either now or later. We finish this section off with our first honorary lesson, which is Snap, a bounce spell that untaps lands upon its resolution. To prevent our own permanents from getting removed, we run Octopus Form and Snakeskin Veil to buff our creatures and give them hexproof. Our last line of defense are our counterspells. It'll Quench Ya and Sokka's Haiku are both lesson counterspells and are assisted by 3 of our honorary lessons in the form of An Offer You Can't Refuse, Unwind, and Katara's Reversal, which can all pay for themselves depending on your target. We also run Redirect Lightning, which is a lesson that can change the target of a spell. Now that we have the mana, our setup, and our protection, it's Stormin' time. All of the spells we've talked about so far are great for building Storm, especially the lessons. Almost every effect is worth casting a second time at full price, let alone at 1 or often no mana, and especially to increase our Storm count. Like all Storm decks, the best enablers are low-cost spells that put new cards into our hand, but this deck also wants to see cards go into our graveyard so that we can utilize Flashback. Abandoned Attachment slots into this role perfectly, with a 2-mana lesson to discard a card and draw a card. Accumulate Wisdom is also very strong here, often drawing you 3 cards for 2 mana. In addition to our lessons, we have our final honorary lesson, which is Frantic Search, allowing us to draw, discard, and untap lands. Utilizing the discard effects of Gamble and Faithless Looting, as well as the Surveil effect of Consider, gives us access to more cards in our graveyard. Achieving the turn in this deck should usually end the game pretty quickly, but if it doesn't, we have cards like Fated Firepower to help put more damage out and give us a dump for all of our mana, as well as Arcane Bombardment to start repeatedly casting the spells still in our graveyard to get effects in burst. This iteration of the deck is also utilizing Empty the Warrens, an incredibly strong Storm card for going wide, which is cast at the end of the Storm turn to get you a lot of blockers at the very least. I am a huge Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, so this deck was mainly meant to be an homage to the cards I got at pre-release and less so optimized. Nonetheless, this deck feels very strong and can still manage to have some monstrous turns that the table have to respond to or they will all get buried. Even against Graveyard Hate, this deck can really outperform by altering your strategy from trying to have one big turn into having several admittedly still long turns where you can get very high storm counts and get payoffs that you need. The first of the 5 cards I would say can be taken out is Badger Mole Cub. It's an incredibly strong card. I'm only running it because I got it at pre-release. It does not do a lot here. The Legend of Roku is in a very similar position. The first 2 chapters of the saga are very helpful for our Storm strategy, but once he flips over, he's a mana sink, and we will hopefully be using our mana to cast a bunch of spells rather than making 4/4 dragons. Master Paku is a nice 2-drop, but you can get better prowess creatures out there for similar or even better rates. His mill effect also probably won't be showing up very often since we're exiling our lessons from our graveyard. I'm hesitant to remove any lessons, but I think Aang's Journey or Environmental Sciences, which are basically the same card, are among our weaker effects and you could probably be safe cutting one of them. Lastly, and this is kind of a cop-out, the number of basic lands is likely too high, but due to the decently high number of ways to not only find basics but also to earthbend fetch lands, I like having a high basic land count and a high fetch land count. The first of the additions that I would like to add is actually from the Avatar Jumpstart set, and it is Longshot Rebel Bowman, which is what happens when you glue Gutter Snipe to a discount spell, and will likely get the game over very quickly. Haste enablers like Mass Hysteria would also do really well in this deck. Even for just Iroh, getting to Firebend 2 on the turn that you cast him is already very strong. Any card with Magecraft would be great, but especially Stormkiln Artist. Those treasures will let you cast lessons from your graveyard with their flashback cost immediately. Strong lessons would be great, such as Illuminate History, which can let you wheel, which, as I keep saying, is busted in this deck given the flashback cost of lessons. The last and most obvious sweep of cards are Storm cards. For my strategy, Haze of Rage would be by far the strongest. It lets me buff my tokens, and all the Storm cards get the added benefit of being able to be cast twice, meaning that if I cast my initial Haze of Rage with a Storm count of 5, I can flash it back for a total of 13 instances of Haze of Rage to give my creatures plus 13 plus 0. To channel my inner Uncle Iroh, I will say that the best cards to add into this deck are cards that you want to cast twice. Getting to play an instant or sorcery that I like not once but twice in a singleton format is a great time. As always, thank you for hanging out until the end. If you want to like and subscribe, please do, and have a nice day. We will see you next time.